Hello, my name is Nick Huntington-Klein. In this video, I'm going to be talking about pricing power and how we can solve out a profit maximizing quantity and price for a monopoly. So first of all, what is pricing power? So far in this class, we've been talking about competitive markets. So markets where there's so many producers and so many consumers that nobody really has any sort of control over the price, right? You just sort of have to see what the going rate is of the thing you're trying to sell and go with that. If you tried to sell for more than anybody else, nobody would bother buying from you. They just go to one of your competitors who's selling for a lower price. So why would you do that? Pricing power is what happens when there is some sort of restriction on the amount of competition available in the market. If there's restriction on competition, then that means that you might be able to set your own price because you would control a larger share of the market, and people can't just go to a cheaper competitor because there might not be a cheaper competitor. And even if you're making a lot of profit, then people might not be able to enter the market to compete against you because there is some sort of barrier to entry keeping people from competing against you. There are lots of reasons why these sorts of barriers to entry could pop up that could give you pricing power. So for example, maybe you are a diamond seller and you control all of the diamond mines. If somebody wanted to compete against you for diamonds, what could they possibly do? They can't go get more diamonds to compete with you against because you own all the diamond mines. Or for example, maybe you have a patent or some sort of technological innovation and other people are either legally not able to copy or they don't know how to copy. And so nobody could compete against you because they just don't have the technology to be able to do that. And so you would have some control over that market. People would not be able to compete against you. And so when we have a barrier to entry, when we have a lack of competition, that's going to give us pricing power. So unlike in the competitive market where we just sort of have to go along with whatever the going rate price is, we have a little bit of control for ourselves to figure out, would we rather, for example, charge a low price and sell a lot of units, or charge a high price and sell a smaller number of units. We still have to deal with the fact that there's a demand curve and people are only willing to pay so much for stuff, but at least we don't have to lower our prices for competition reasons. So as you can probably guess, this is going to end up working out really well for the firms who have the pricing power, not so well for the consumers. So let's do the simplest form of pricing power. Let's say that we have a monopoly. So there's only one firm in the market, and that's it. There's no competition whatsoever. It's just this one firm. Now, when we have this, you can think about, well, okay, how's this going to affect the model that we would have for that firm? So in a competitive market model, we had the marginal cost, we had the average cost, we had a flat demand curve because you had no control over the price. Now, we are not facing a flat demand curve anymore. We are, as the monopolist, facing the entire market all on our own because we're the only firm faced up against the entire demand side of the market. Now, demand curves in the market slope down. And so the demand curve that we face as a monopoly producer is also going to slope down. So let's look at the curves for a monopolist and figure out how we can maximize profit for this firm. And by doing this, the purpose of doing this is not to help monopolists figure out how to maximize their profits. The purpose of this is to try to figure out what monopolists are going to do, how they're going to act in response to certain things changing, and how we might be able to develop policy around that. So let's start with this. So let's say first we have our regular old curves like we had before. We have a price up there. We have our quantity down here. We have a marginal cost curve, which has that nice familiar J shape. We have our same average cost curve that we had before that intersects at the very bottom of our average cost curve. Next, we can start adding on the demand curve. Now, this is going to slope downwards because we face the entire market demand curve, unlike with the competitive firm. So I can draw in a nice demand curve like this. Okay, so next, we're going to introduce something new. So far, these three curves we've had on the competitive market, the demand curve didn't look like that, but we had it. So we have to introduce one more curve, and that is the marginal revenue curve. All right, so what is this? So the marginal revenue curve is the additional amount of money that you make by selling one more unit of the good. Now, why isn't that just the price? So you sell one more unit of the good, you should get paid at the price. That's how it works in the competitive market. Shouldn't that be how it works here too? Well, yeah, you sell one more unit of the good, you get paid the price. However, keep in mind, whatever our price was before, right? So however many units we wanted to sell before, we were already going to charge the maximum amount we could possibly get away with charging for that many units of the good. So let's say that we're selling something, we're selling it for 10 bucks, okay? And we are selling it at 10 bucks, we can find 100 people who are willing to buy a unit of our good at $10. Now let's say that we want to sell a 101st unit of that good. Now, we already know that there's nobody out there. There's not 101st person out there who's willing to buy that unit of the good for $10. If we want to sell to that person, we're going to have to lower our prices, which also means that we're going to have to lower our prices on everybody else as well, right? If we're selling for a single price, it's not like we can say, oh, hey, you people, we know you were willing to buy at a higher price, so we're going to charge you more, and we're only going to charge the new people less. There are some ways around this. That's what we get to with price discrimination, which we'll talk about in a bit. But for now, let's say we have to charge everybody the same price. So if I want to sell to more people, I'm going to have to lower the price on everybody. So when I sell another unit of the good, I get paid the price, but I lose money because I had to lower the price on everybody else. So the additional amount of revenue that I bring in by selling one more unit is a little bit less than the price. And so I'm going to draw that in here. I'm going to have a marginal revenue curve in here. It's going to be lower than demand. It's also going to slope down more quickly than demand. And I can actually tell you that when we have a straight line demand curve like this, the slope of the marginal revenue curve is going to be exactly twice the demand curve. It's going to slope down twice as quickly. Okay, so we have the curves of importance, and just like with the competitive firm, we can follow some very basic steps to figure out how we can maximize profit. So the first step, as always, is to follow the golden rule of microeconomics, which is to set marginal benefit equal to marginal cost. Now we have marginal cost on the graph. If we're a firm, we care about our revenues. That's the benefit that we get. So the marginal revenue is our marginal benefit. So step number one, set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. And that's going to give us our quantity. So we look for where marginal revenue and marginal cost cross, follow it down. That's going to give us our optimal profit maximizing quantity Q. I'm going to call that QM or Q star. So that's step number one. Step number two, we're going to add a new step that wasn't there for the competitive firms, which is we can also choose our own price. And so what we're going to be basically doing here is saying, okay, given the amount of quantity that we want to sell, what's the most that we can possibly sell all that stuff for? So we're going to ask the demand curve. We're going to say, hey, demand curve, I want to sell this many units. At what price are you going to be willing to buy that many units? So I'm going to take my quantity, I'm going to follow it up to the demand curve, and that is going to be the price that I'm going to charge. I'm going to call that PM or QM. From here, it gets a lot more standard. We follow basically just what we did with the competitive firm. We take our quantity, we plug it into average cost. That's going to give us our average cost as a number. Now we have drawn a box. This is our profit box. Every unit that we sell, on average, the profit that we make from that is the price that we get paid minus the average cost of production, which also includes things like opportunity cost. And so this box that we have drawn, this is going to be our profit area, like this. Notice, by the way, what would be the optimal, the efficient quantity to produce? Well, for efficiency, we want the marginal cost to equal, from society's point of view, marginal benefit. Where's society's marginal benefit on this graph? It's not the marginal revenue, it's on the demand curve. So the efficient quantity would be where marginal cost and demand meet right here. So that would be Q, I'm going to call that QE for Q efficient. That's not what we're producing. We are underproducing. So a monopolist is going to produce too few units. And we're going to end up with this little area of deadweight loss, this little triangle in here, sort of between demand and marginal cost over the units that we should have sold in efficiency, but we did not sell. And the reason we're not selling them is because we'd rather sell a smaller number of units at a higher price than lower our prices so that the efficient number of people could buy, right? Our goal is not, as the monopolist, we care about our own profits. We don't care about efficiency. Okay, so we have followed these steps with a graph to show how we can maximize our profit by choosing the appropriate quantity and price. Let's do it mathematically as well. So let's switch over here. So we're going to follow the exact same steps, except we're going to do it with some algebraic demand curves. So we have demand curve here, we have our total cost, we have our marginal cost. So the first step is we're going to set marginal cost equal to marginal revenue. I haven't written down marginal revenue here, but as I mentioned, marginal revenue is what you get if you take the demand curve and you just double the slope on Q. So demand is price equals 60 minus Q, then marginal revenue is 60 minus 2Q. There we go. So now we have marginal revenue. So we can follow the first step of setting marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. So we have marginal revenue 60 minus 2Q. That's going to equal 12 plus 4Q, which we have down here for marginal cost. Solve this out. We get that 48 is equal to 6Q. Divide both sides by 6. We get that our optimal quantity is 8, Q star or QM. Step number 2, if we want to figure out how much we can sell this many units for, we take this quantity and we say, ask the demand curve. Hey, demand curve, what are you willing to pay for 8 units? So we take our demand curve, which is price equals 60 minus Q, and then we plug in our Q, so that's 60 minus 8, or 52. So the price that we're willing to pay is 52. So the profit maximizing quantity is 8, profit maximizing price is 52. Next, plug quantity to the average cost. I haven't given you average cost, but I have given you total cost. Average cost is just total cost divided by Q. That's 36 plus 12Q plus 2Q squared over Q, which is 36 over Q, plus 12Q over Q. The Q's cancel out, so we just get 12 plus 2Q squared over Q. One of the Q's cancels out, so we just get 2Q. We can plug our quantity into that, so we get 36 over 8 plus 12 plus 2 times 8. 36 over 8 is 4. Plus 12 plus 2 times 8 is 16. 4 plus 16 is 20, plus 12 is 32. So our average cost is 32. And then finally, we can plug everything into our profit. Profit is quantity times price minus average cost. Right? The number of units we sell times the average amount of profit we make on each unit is the total amount of profit. So our quantity is 8. Our price is 52. Our average cost is 32. So we get 8 times 20, or 160 units of profit. So pricing power comes from when you have some sort of barrier to entry that keeps people from being able to compete against you, even though you're making a profit. They might want to enter the market, but they can't. And so this gives you an amount of pricing power where you have some control over what price you sell stuff for, because you don't have the same amount of competitors that people could just go to if you were normally trying to sell your stuff for too much. You will then choose a price that is too high and a quantity that is too low so as to maximize your profit. The way we can figure out what quantity and price maximizes your profit is by setting marginal revenue equal to marginal cost to get the quantity, plug that quantity into the demand curve to get the price, plug the quantity into average cost to get average cost, and then plug everything into profit to get your profit. We can follow these steps algebraically, or we can follow them graphically. And graphically, we can see here that we're going to end up with a deadweight loss between the demand curve and the marginal cost, between the quantity that we do produce, QM, which happens where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, and the efficient quantity, which happens where demand and marginal cost meet, which is going to be a little bit higher. All right, that is how we can solve out a monopoly model. Thank you very much.